The sun was a red coin melting into the western horizon, spilling blood-colored light across the plains. Marshal Elias Boone sat tall in his saddle, squinting through the dust that shimmered off the trail ahead. His badge, tarnished, half-bent, hung heavy on his vest. Folks once said Boone's badge gleamed like justice itself. Now it looked more like guilt. He'd been chasing Jesse Kade, the Silver Spur Bandit, for nearly 6 years. Every time Boone got close, Jesse vanished into another canyon, another town, another legend. Some said Jesse rode with devils. Others said he rode with angels. Boone didn't believe in either, but he believed in catching him. The trail led Boone to Redwater, a town that used to whisper his name with pride. But as his horse clopped down Main Street, folks didn't smile like they used to. A few turned away. A few spat near his boots. Boone ignored it. He tied his horse outside the Dusty Lantern Saloon. The sign creaked, swinging in the wind like a hangman's noose. Inside, the piano stopped mid-note as he walked in. The bartender, a wiry man with a scar under his chin, wiped a glass and nodded cautiously. "Marshal Boone, thought you was long gone." "Nearly was," Boone said, voice gravel dry. "You seen Jesse Kade pass through?" The bartender hesitated. "You asking as a lawman or a ghost?" "'Cause folks say you been both." Boone leaned forward. "Answer the question." Before the man could speak, a woman's voice cut through the silence. "Leave him be, Boone." Boone turned. Standing by the staircase was Clara Hale, the saloon owner, and Jesse Kade's old flame. Her eyes burned like gunpowder. "You ain't welcome here no more," she said. "Redwater's got no use for law that brings nothing but graves." Boone's hand hovered near his revolver. "Law don't choose who dies, Clara." "Maybe not," she said coldly. "But you sure do." Outside, thunder rolled, a storm of hooves. Boone stepped into the night, unsure which one was coming for him, and somewhere out there Jesse Kade smiled beneath a wide-brimmed hat, watching from the hills. The chase wasn't over, it was just turning back on itself. Marshal Elias Boone woke before dawn, the cold air biting through his coat. He'd slept behind the livery stable, too proud to ask the hotel for a room, and too aware of the stares that would follow him if he did. The last time he'd been in Redwater, he'd dragged out 3 rustlers and a drunk deputy who'd shot his own brother. Folks had called him a hero then. Now the streets were lined with faces that looked at him like a ghost who refused to lie down. As the sun climbed, Boone walked toward the sheriff's office. The wooden sign still said Marshal's Post, though the paint was cracked and fading like the memory of the law itself. Inside, dust motes floated in the morning light. His old desk was still there. So was the bullet hole in the wall from the night he and Jesse Kade had their last gunfight. He stared at it for a long time. "You gonna arrest the wall, Boone?" The voice came from behind him, gruff, half amused. It was Deputy Cal Dugan, younger than Boone but twice as bitter now. Boone turned slowly. "Didn't expect you to still be here, Cal." "Didn't expect you to come back," Cal replied. "You chasing Kade again? After all this time?" Boone nodded once. Cal laughed, the sound dry and mean. "You don't get it, do you? Folks here, they don't want him caught anymore." Boone frowned. "You mean they're scared?" Cal's jaw tightened. "No, I mean they like him. The bandit feeds the town, keeps the rail company off their backs, pays for medicine when the mines shut down. He's done more good for Redwater than the badge ever did." The words hit Boone harder than a bullet. "You telling me they'd rather side with a thief than the law?" "I'm telling you," Cal said quietly. "They already have." Boone walked out, boots crunching in the dirt. He could feel the eyes of the townsfolk watching from doorways and windows, whispering. He'd hunted Jesse Kade for years, for murder, for robbery, for betrayal. Now for the first time, Boone wasn't sure who the outlaw really was. As he reached the end of Main Street, a small hand tugged at his coat. A young boy, no older than 8, stared up at him with bright eyes. "You the marshal?" the boy asked. "Used to be," Boone said. "My ma says Jesse Kade's a good man. Says he saved my pa from the mine cave-in." Boone knelt down. "Maybe he did, but good men don't run from the law." The boy tilted his head. "Maybe the law's running from the truth." Boone stood, heart heavy as iron. The boy's words followed him like a shadow. And from the hills beyond Redwater, a shot rang out, one single. Sharp crack. A bullet hit the marshal's badge, shattering the last bit of shine left on it. When Boone looked up, there was no one on the ridge, just a flutter of dust and the sound of a horse riding away. Jesse Kade had sent his message. The hunt was back on. Boone rode hard through the Badlands that evening, the echo of that rifle shot still ringing in his skull. His badge was cracked down the middle, the bullet having taken the silver clean off one side. He pinned it back anyway. It wasn't pride. It was habit. The trail led south of Redwater, into the narrow canyons called Devil's Ribbon, where the wind howled like something alive. It was where Jesse Kade used to hide his loot, or so folks said. But Boone knew Jesse better than anyone. He knew the man didn't care much for gold. He cared for revenge, for justice twisted into his own kind. By the time Boone reached the canyon mouth, dusk had fallen. The shadows were deep, the air cold. His horse snorted nervously. Then came the whistle, a two-note signal Boone hadn't heard in 6 years. "You still whistle like a snake, Kade," Boone said quietly, hand resting on his revolver. "And you still wear that tin star like it means something," came a voice from the rocks. Smooth, amused, almost friendly. Jesse Kade stepped out from behind a boulder, his coat dusty, his hat pulled low. His revolver hung loose at his side. But it was his eyes, calm, sharp, tired, that stopped Boone cold. They were the eyes of a man who'd seen hell and come back with the devil's handshake. 6 years, Boone said. "You could have run anywhere. Why come back here?" Jesse smiled faintly. "Same reason you did, Marshal. Some debts need settling." Boone's jaw tightened. "You killed 3 men at the Copper Trail mine. You robbed the freight line. You shot a deputy. And how many miners did the company kill when they buried that shaft alive? How many families starved while you polished your badge?" Jesse shot back. Boone took a step closer. "You're no saint, Jesse. Never claimed to be. But tell me, Boone, when was the last time the law helped someone without a dollar to their name?" Boone hesitated. For the first time, the line between them seemed thin as dust. Then Jesse tossed something toward him. It hit Boone's chest and fell into his hand, a small leather pouch. Inside was money, worn bills and silver coins. "From the rail job last month," Jesse said. "Half of it went to the widows in Redwater. The rest's for the orphanage in Larkspur. Call it charity. Call it guilt. I don't care." "You expect me to believe that?" Boone said. "You don't need to believe it," Jesse replied. "Just see what your badge is worth these days." He turned to leave. Boone's gun hand twitched, but he didn't draw. "Next time I won't hesitate," Boone said quietly. Jesse looked over his shoulder. "You already are." Then he vanished into the canyon shadows like smoke. Boone stood alone, the wind tugging at his coat, the badge cracked and dull against his chest. For the first time in years, he didn't know if he was chasing a criminal or a cause. Far away, thunder rolled again. But it wasn't a storm this time. It was hooves, many of them riding toward Redwater. The next morning, Redwater woke to thunder. Not from the sky, but from the hooves of 12 riders kicking up dust across Main Street. They wore clean coats, gleaming spurs, and the kind of authority that didn't ask for permission. At their head rode Marshal Cyrus Vane, a tall man with a scarred face and a badge so polished it hurt to look at. He dismounted slow, surveying the town like a hawk eyeing prey. Boone stood outside the saloon, hands on his belt, watching as Vane's men tied their horses. The townsfolk scattered. Only Clara Hale stayed put, standing in the doorway, her gaze sharp and unwelcoming. "Elias Boone," Vane said, voice smooth but edged with command. "Didn't think the Bureau still had you on the payroll." "They don't," Boone replied. "I came on my own business." "That business wouldn't happen to be Jesse Kade, would it?" Vane asked, smirking. "'Cause Washington wants him dead." "Not captured, dead." Boone's jaw stiffened. "Law don't issue death sentences without trial." Vane laughed, a deep, cold sound. "Maybe not where you came from. But out here, the railroads write the law now. And the rails say Kade's bad for business." He handed Boone a folded letter stamped with the Bureau's seal. Boone opened it slowly. "Order of authorization. Neutralize Jesse Kade by any means necessary." "You can't be serious," Boone muttered. "Serious as the grave," Vane said. "This territory's changing. There's no room for legends or lone riders with old rules." Boone's fingers tightened around the paper. "You ain't hunting justice, Vane. You're hunting a paycheck." Vane stepped closer, his voice lowering. "You had your chance, Boone. 6 years chasing that ghost and nothing to show. Now it's my turn." Boone didn't move as Vane brushed past him, boots echoing on the wooden planks. His men fanned out across Redwater, checking barns, rifling through wagons, knocking down doors. The people of Redwater watched with silent, simmering anger. Even Clara whispered under her breath, Guess the law finally remembered we exist. That night Boone sat in the saloon alone, nursing whiskey he couldn't taste. The piano sat quiet. No one dared play under Vane's shadow. Clara approached, setting a lantern on his table. "They're tearing this town apart, Elias," she said. "They say it's for our safety. But I seen the way they look at folks like we're in the way." Boone stared at his reflection in the amber glass. "If I don't stop Kade, they will. And they'll burn half the territory doing it." "Then maybe," she said softly, "you're chasing the wrong man." Outside, the wind carried faint gunfire, far but moving closer. Boone rose from his chair, his decision heavy as the revolver at his hip. The badge he wore no longer shone. But the oath behind it still burned. He would find Jesse Kade before Vane did. Not to kill him, but to save what little law was left in the west. The moon hung low over the plains, pale as a ghost's lantern. Boone rode out of Redwater before dawn, keeping to the dry riverbeds and sagebrush trails Jesse Kade once used to slip through the hills. Behind him, Marshal Vane's riders spread out like wolves, clean-armed and merciless. Boone wasn't running from them. He was racing ahead of them. He needed to find Jesse first. By mid-morning, Boone reached the edge of a small settlement, a scattering of cabins and a church half collapsed by time. It wasn't on any map. The sign said Larkspur Haven, the place Jesse had mentioned back in the canyon. Children played in the dirt while women washed clothes in metal tubs. But what stopped Boone cold was the sight of a schoolhouse with a brand new roof and walls built from sturdy pine. In a town that poor, something like that didn't come easy. A woman stepped out onto the porch, holding a rifle loose in her arms. Her eyes narrowed the second she saw the badge. "You lost, Marshal?" Boone raised a hand slowly. "Just looking for answers." "We already got answers," she said. "We got food, medicine, roofs over our heads, and none of that came from the law." "Jesse Kade been here?" Boone asked. The woman hesitated, jaw tight. Then she nodded once. "He built that school, paid the preacher's widow when her man died, left money for every family here. Told us if anyone came wearing a badge to tell them this." She stepped closer, her voice lowering. He said, "Boone will come. Tell him he can't fix the world by shooting its shadows." Boone's breath caught. It wasn't just the words, it was the trust in them. Jesse knew Boone would come. Knew he'd start to doubt. He also said, the woman continued, that if you still carry the badge, you'll need to choose soon which side of it you stand on. Boone looked around the settlement, at the children laughing, the repaired homes, the hope that flickered here where the law never reached. He realized Jesse wasn't stealing to grow rich. He was stealing to build something the world refused to give these people, and yet to the law it was still a crime. Before Boone could reply, a distant gunshot echoed off the hills. Then another. The woman's face went pale. They found him. Boone swung onto his horse, boots hitting the stirrups in one smooth motion. "Which way?" "South Ridge, near the old mine." Boone kicked the reins hard, dust exploding beneath the hooves. His hat whipped back in the wind. As he rode, the air filled with gunfire, the kind that didn't stop once it started. Marshal Vane's men had reached Jesse Kade first, and Boone realized, for the first time in years, he wasn't chasing the outlaw anymore. He was riding to save him. The wind screamed across the South Ridge, carrying with it the echo of rifles and the stench of burning powder. The old Copper Trail mine, abandoned years ago after its last cave-in, was now a battlefield. Boone's horse tore across the dry earth, lungs heaving, hooves pounding like a war drum. When he crested the ridge, the world below him was chaos. Marshal Vane's men were spread in a half-circle around the mine entrance, their rifles flashing in the sun. Bullets sparked off rock. Smoke curled up in grey ribbons, and in the center of it all, firing from behind a fallen wagon, was Jesse Kade. He wasn't running. He was holding, buying time for something Boone couldn't yet see. Boone slid off his horse, ducking behind a boulder as a bullet hissed past his hat. He counted the rhythm of the shots. Jesse's six-gun firing in short, deliberate bursts, Vane's men answering in waves of noise and fear. Then Boone saw it, behind Jesse, a small group of townsfolk. Miners, farmers, even women and children. They were fleeing through a narrow pass, clutching sacks of grain and medicine. Jesse was covering their escape. Boone swore under his breath. "Damn you, Kade. You're not robbing anymore. You're saving them." A shout rose over the gunfire. Marshal Cyrus Vane rode up the ridge, his polished badge glinting. "Boone!" he roared. "You got one chance. Stand with the law or die with the thief." Boone stepped from cover, rifle in hand but not raised. "Call off your men, Vane. There are civilians down there." "They're accomplices," Vane spat. "They protect him, they die with him. That ain't justice." "Justice?" Vane sneered. "Justice is what the railroads pay me for." The next moment happened in a blur. Vane's rifle cracked, the bullet striking the rock inches from Boone's face. Boone dove low, rolled and fired once. His shot hit Vane's horse, sending the marshal tumbling into the dirt. Chaos broke loose. Jesse spotted Boone across the smoke-filled ridge. For a split second, the two men locked eyes, old enemies bound now by something heavier than hate. Boone waved toward the escaping settlers. Jesse nodded once, understanding. Then Jesse stood up, firing wildly to draw Vane's men away from the pass. He took one in the shoulder but didn't fall. The settlers disappeared into the hills, safe. When Boone reached Jesse's side, Jesse was bleeding but grinning. "Didn't think you'd show up on my side, Marshal. Didn't think I'd ever have to," Boone replied, reloading fast. Guess the badge finally remembered what it was for. Vane rose from the dust, fury in his eyes. "You're both dead men," he bellowed. Boone leveled his revolver. "Not today." They fired almost at the same time. Vane's bullet grazed Boone's arm. Boone's shot tore through Vane's hat, spinning it into the dirt. The rest of Vane's men faltered, no one sure who to follow now that their leader was down. Jesse stumbled, gripping his wound, but managed to swing onto Boone's horse. "Come on, Marshal. Unless you want to explain to your friends why you're helping the most wanted man in the territory." Boone hesitated only a moment, then mounted behind him. They rode hard into the dust, bullets whining past. Behind them, Vane's voice faded in the wind. "You can run, Kade, but the badge always finds you." Boone didn't look back. Neither did Jesse, for now the law was chasing both of them. Redwater looked different when Boone rode back in. The wind still swept the same dust through the streets, but the faces that met him were harder now. Suspicious, quiet, waiting. The town had seen the gun smoke from the ridge and heard the echoes of the fight. They didn't know what side Boone was on anymore, and neither did he. Jesse Kade was hidden out in the foothills, weak but alive. Boone had dropped him at an abandoned line shack 2 miles west, wrapped his wound and left enough water and bullets to hold out. For now. Now Boone walked into the marshal's post, the same office he'd once ruled with iron discipline. Sitting behind his old desk, cleaning a revolver like it was a sacred ritual, was Deputy Cal Dugan. "Well, hell," Cal said, grinning without warmth. "Look who crawled back from the grave." "Vane's men are spread thin," Boone said flatly. "He's pushing the town too hard. You seen what they're doing out there?" "I seen it," Cal said. "And I seen what happens when men like Kade start thinking they're heroes. We both know how that ends." Boone's eyes narrowed. "You've been talking to Vane." Cal's smirk deepened. "Vane offered me a job, deputy marshal for the whole territory once Kade's gone. Said the law's changing, time to get on the right side of it." "That ain't the right side, Cal, that's the bought side." Cal shrugged, holstering his pistol. "Ain't that what you taught me? Pick the winning side and ride it till it bucks?" Boone took a slow step forward. "I taught you to stand your ground." Cal rose, his chair scraping the floor. "Ground's shifting, old man. You're too blind to see it. The people don't want your kind of law anymore. They want Kade's kind, or Vane's. Either way, you don't fit." The silence between them stretched thin as a trigger wire. Boone spoke quietly. "Where is he, Cal?" Cal's eyes gleamed. "You mean Kade?" "Oh, I know. Word travels fast. He's hiding west, near the old telegraph trail. Vane's men are right in there tonight." Boone's gut twisted. "You sold him out." "I sold peace," Cal said. "One dead outlaw, one clean town. That's a fair trade." Boone moved fast. His hand hit Cal's chest, shoving him back against the wall. The younger man's revolver clattered to the floor. Boone's voice was low, furious. "You ever think what happens when the law starts taking orders from money? You think it ends with Jesse Kade. It ends with all of us," Cal sneered. "Maybe, but at least I'll still be breathing." Boone stepped back, disgusted. He turned toward the door. "We walk out that door, Boone," Cal said, rubbing his throat, "and you'll be wanted same as him." Boone paused. "Then maybe the law's finally honest about who it hunts." He left without another word. As the sun set behind the town, Boone saddled his horse again. The choice was made. He'd saved Jesse once, but now he'd have to do it again. And this time the whole territory would be watching. From the saloon doorway, Clara Hale watched him ride off. Her voice was barely a whisper carried by the wind. God help you, Marshal. You just turned your back on everything you were. Boone didn't look back, because somewhere in the hills, Jesse Kade was waiting to die, and Boone couldn't let that happen. The night air was sharp, filled with the electric scent of oncoming rain. Boone rode fast through the scrublands, his horse lathered in sweat, hooves striking sparks off rock. The telegraph trail stretched ahead, a line of broken poles and rusted wire that once connected Redwater to the world. Now it was nothing but ghosts and wind, and Jesse Kade was somewhere in those ruins. Boone found him at dawn, slumped by a dying fire, pale from blood loss, but still cleaning his revolver. The stubbornness in his eyes hadn't dimmed. "You should have kept riding, Marshal," Jesse said without looking up. "Didn't figure you for a man who saves what he hunts." "Didn't figure you for a man worth saving," Boone replied. "Guess we're both wrong." Jesse chuckled, wincing. "Vane's coming, ain't he?" "Yeah," Boone said. "And he's bringing hell with him." Jesse's gaze drifted toward the horizon, where dark clouds gathered like cavalry. "Then let's give him a storm worth remembering." They set their traps quick and quiet. Mining powder from Jesse's old saddlebags, loose wire from the fallen telegraph line, and a handful of bullets Boone had left. They'd be outnumbered, but they weren't outwitted. When Vane's riders finally appeared, they came like thunder. 12 men, rifles gleaming, faces wrapped in scarves to keep out the grit. Vane rode at the front, his scar catching the first light of morning. "Boone!" Vane's voice boomed across the flats. "You're harboring a fugitive. Step aside or hang with him." Boone stood tall beside Jesse, his cracked badge pinned to his coat. "You don't get to hang justice, Vane. Not while I'm breathing," Vane smirked. "Then I'll fix that." The first shot came from Jesse. It split the silence like lightning. Then the world erupted. Bullets tore through dust and dawn. Jesse fired from the rocks, Boone from the wagon. The telegraph wire, stretched low across the pass, caught one rider clean in the throat, sending him tumbling under his horse. Another hit the powder keg, blasting 2 more men into the air. For a moment, Boone almost believed they could win. Then a rifle cracked from behind, a sniper on the ridge. The bullet slammed into Boone's shoulder, spinning him backward. He hit the ground hard, vision blurring. "Boone!" Jesse yelled, dragging him behind cover. "Stay with me." Boone's hand found Jesse's arm. Blood ran hot between their fingers. "You still got that promise to keep," Boone gasped. "You finish this." Jesse's eyes burned with something more than anger, something like loyalty. He rose, firing until his revolver clicked empty. Then he charged down the slope, knife flashing in his good hand. Vane's men scattered, but Vane didn't flinch. He raised his pistol, waited for Jesse to come close, and fired. The sound echoed like thunder. Jesse fell to one knee, clutching his side. Vane rode closer, lowering his smoking gun. "That's for making me chase ghosts, boy." Before Vane could fire again, Boone's revolver roared. The bullet hit Vane square in the chest, knocking him clean off his horse. The battlefield went still. Boone struggled to his feet, blood soaking his sleeve. He stumbled toward Jesse, who lay breathing shallow, eyes skyward. "You still think I ain't worth saving?" Jesse rasped. Boone knelt beside him. "Reckon you saved me first." Jesse smiled faintly. Maybe the law and the outlaw weren't so different after all. "Maybe the world just got tired of both," Boone said softly. Jesse's hand went limp in his. The thunder rolled overhead, and the rain finally came, washing blood into the dust, washing the badge clean. By the time Boone stood again, Vane was dead, his men scattered. The fight was over. But there was no victory in the air, only silence and rain. The rain didn't stop for 3 days. By the time Boone rode back into Redwater, the streets were rivers of mud. The townsfolk gathered in silence as he came through the square. Jesse Kade's body laid across the back of his horse. Covered in Boone's old coat, the once feared outlaw looked almost peaceful now, like he'd finally outpaced the chase. Boone dismounted slowly. His arm was wrapped in a blood-soaked bandage, his badge dull and cracked. Every step toward the old church felt heavier than the last. The people parted for him, not in fear, not in respect, but in sorrow. Clara Hale was the first to step forward. Her eyes filled with tears when she saw the coat, the worn boots. "You brought him home," she whispered. "He belonged here," Boone said quietly. "Always did." The preacher said a few words over the body, but Boone barely heard them. He was looking at the faces in the crowd. Miners, ranchers, widows, children. These were the people Jesse had stolen for, fought for, died for. When the coffin was lowered into the earth behind the church, Clara knelt beside it. "He wasn't no saint," she said, "but he gave us a life when the law forgot we had one." Someone from the crowd called out, "Then he deserves a marker." Boone nodded. He pulled Jesse's revolver from his holster, cleaned, oiled, still shining despite the dust of battle, and set it on the grave. "No stone'll say more than that," he said. The crowd murmured their agreement. But as Boone turned to leave, he saw Deputy Cal Dugan standing near the saloon watching. His new badge gleamed bright, Vane's badge. "You're under arrest, Boone," Cal said, voice shaking slightly, "for aiding a fugitive and obstructing federal duty." Boone looked at him for a long time, rain dripping from his hat brim. Then he stepped forward until they were nearly face to face. "You really think you can arrest me, Cal? After what that man gave this town?" "The law don't change for feelings," Cal said. Though his voice cracked on the word law, Boone's eyes were cold. "No, son. The law changes when it forgets who it's for." Cal hesitated. He looked around and saw every person in Redwater standing behind Boone. The men, the women, the children. Not one of them moved to help him. Not one looked afraid. Finally, Cal lowered his gun. The badge on his chest suddenly looked smaller. "You're making a mistake," he muttered. Boone shook his head. "Maybe, but it's the first one I can live with." He turned, mounting his horse again. As he rode out of town, the people stayed quiet, heads bowed, rain falling steady on the fresh grave behind them. When the wind finally cleared, there was no trace of Marshal Elias Boone, only a wooden marker where the Silver Spur Bandit lay buried. The inscription, carved by Clara's hand, read simply, "He stole from the rich, but he gave us back our home." And beneath it, faint but deliberate, someone had nailed Boone's shattered badge. The two men's legacies, one outlaw, one lawman, finally side by side. Weeks passed. The rains ended, and the prairie bloomed again. Wildflowers grew along the grave behind the church, their colors soft against the red earth. Travelers passing through Redwater would stop and ask who Jesse Kade was, and the townsfolk would tell them, not the story written in wanted posters, but the one written in gratitude. No one mentioned the man who brought him home. Marshal Elias Boone had vanished. Some said he rode north, into the Badlands where no railroad dared reach. Others whispered he'd joined a wagon train under another name, wearing no badge, carrying no gun. But those who'd seen him last, the old men who sat outside the saloon, nursing coffee and memory, told a different story. They said a lone rider sometimes passed by Redwater at dusk. That he never entered town, never spoke a word. He'd stop at the hill behind the church, take off his hat, and stand by the grave for a spell before riding off toward the horizon. And when the sun hit just right, they swore the wind caught the glint of a broken badge tied to his saddle. Clara Hale saw him once, or maybe she only dreamed it. She was closing the saloon one evening when she looked out toward the plains and saw that silhouette, tall in the saddle, moving slow against the sunset. She whispered to herself, "Goodbye, Marshal." The figure paused, like it hurt her. Then it rode on, vanishing into the red-gold light. No one ever caught sight of him again. But in time, folks stopped using the word bandit when they spoke of Jesse Kade. They called him the man who gave Redwater back its soul, and when they spoke of Boone, their voices lowered with respect. Not the respect owed to a lawman, but the kind saved for men who stood between right and wrong and paid the price for both. Years later, a traveler found a rusted badge in the desert, bent and worn smooth by sand. On the back, scratched in rough letters, were 4 words, "For justice, not glory." He took it to Redwater and left it on Jesse's grave. The wind picked up then, dry, wild, endless, and the sound it made wasn't mournful. It was proud, because some men die chasing justice, and some men become it. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more unforgettable tales from me. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss a new episode. Thanks for watching.